At Psych with Mike, we have a centralized location where all of our episodes are, and that's psychwithmike.com. But that's not the only way that you can get the show. The show is available pretty much anywhere that you download podcasts. So you can go to your preferred podcast provider and subscribe to Psych with Mike there. If you find one that we're not available on, please let us know here at the show, because I would love to correct that. But go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe to the show there. And while you're there, leave us a comment and rate us. That is so incredibly beneficial to the show, and we would really appreciate it. And if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. Welcome into the Psych with Mike Library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan, and I am here with a refreshed and incredibly tan, which is not good radio, Mr. Brett Newcomb.
Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
But if you want to see Brett incredibly tan, then go to the YouTubes and look for this episode on the YouTubes. Although if you're...
They won't let us post them in the nude.
I have not yet tried that.
You haven't?
No, but I'm assuming that there is some kind of restriction against it. But if you want me to try it, then you start disrobing, and I'll...
let's just go with this.
All right, okay. So you have recently returned home from your vacation travels.
A winter sojourn.
So people, if you don't know, we are based in St. Louis. Mm-hmm. And
I knew that.
You knew that because you live here.
Yeah.
And your goal was to leave town and be gone for the winter. And literally the day you left...
Well, that's been a fantasy of mine my whole adult life, because I taught school.
Uh-huh.
And if you try to get away for a winter vacation in school times, it's very limited time frames. I mean, we managed to go skiing for 3 or 4 days in the winters. But to get a winter-long break
mm-hmm.
was impossible.
Mm-hmm.
So now that I'm retired from teaching, and I don't have that same restriction, my wife is a retired teacher, so we don't have the restrictions we once had on our calendar.
Yeah. So you took off.
We did.
And the day you left,
and this summer we're planning on going to Montreal if Canada will let us in. Right now, Canada won't let Americans in.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although we have a new administration now, so maybe Trudeau is...
Well, it's not that. I think it's the...
Oh, you think it's because of the vaccines? Because of the
mm-hmm.
coronavirus.
Yeah.
But...
Well, that's what they said, and government officials never lie.
No, they would never lie.
Donald Trump told me that.
You left, and it got cold, and it started snowing. We had 20 inches of snow while you were gone.
I knew it was coming.
And the day you came back, it was 60 degrees.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
It's the way we planned it.
If your goal was to be able to leave for the winter, you could not have executed it better.
My mouth to God's ear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on a scale...
Which, by the way, the state of Missouri sent me a new license plate. Random selection of new
your mouth
license
to God's
plate.
ear?
Well, every time I go to a campsite or something, I have to check in. They want to know what's your license plate number. You go to a hotel, you have to check in. They want to know what your license plate number is.
They sent you number 3.
I always tell them, this is my license plate,
mm-hmm.
but I had nothing to do with this. I did not ask for this. It is VF7GOD. You can check it when you go outside.
Oh,
it's
man.
on the car.
Wow.
It's from the state.
Huh.
There you go.
Well, and what are you going to do?
Tell everybody.
I mean, the state...
I'm going to open a church.
Maybe the state...
You know I'm a licensed minister.
knows. I did not know that.
I am. So I may start having sermons. Sermonette.
Well, but you could marry people.
I can. I have.
Yeah.
I've been married twice.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You didn't perform my wedding.
You didn't ask me to.
I didn't know you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was before I knew you. So...
Before we were walking the straight, before you'd been saved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, not before I'd been saved.
Oh, well, there you go.
I was saved in July of 1971.
I got saved several times, but I got lost after that.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying that I stayed saved.
Okay.
No, I mean,
you're a better man than I am, and everybody knows it.
For the sake of full disclosure, I am a Christian, and I understand what it means to be a Christian, and I was saved in 1971, but I did backslide for some period of time after that. I was only like 6 years old, so.
Were you dunked or sprinkled?
Oh, I was dunked. There you go. Hey, I've been dunked 3 times. because every time I would go to a new church, I'd fall in love with the pastor. I'd say, "Hey, can you baptize me?"
Absolutely.
And they'd be like, "Oh, heck yeah!" I've been
the churches where I grew up, every Sunday they'd have a call, and they'd start a hymn at the close of the service. They'd sing the first two verses, and then they'd wait and wait and wait while the music would play, while they had a call for anybody that heard the voice needed to come down and either profess their faith or confess their sins, and get a big hug and welcome home.
I went to revivals in sweat tents in the middle of the summer, where they would put out the question, and you knew that until enough people went down to the front of the altar, they weren't going to stop.
They weren't going to stop. They had a number set in mind.
So you 15, might as well just go.
Well, but you know how those revivals worked in the South in the 50s and 60s, at any rate. They hired evangelists and split the pot with them.
Yeah.
So, because one of my first college roommates was an evangelist who did revivals. And that's how he put himself through college. And on campus, he dressed in fine refinery and drove a spiffy sports car. But when he went to work on his revival week, he'd wear a J.C. Penney suit and drive an old 57 Chevy.
Yeah. Well,
come home with a pot full of cash.
That's right.
Every time.
You got to dress for the job you want.
There you go.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, how emotionally satisfying was your trip?
10.
Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's great. And your wife felt the same way?
She has a harder time getting along with me than I have with getting along with her.
Yeah, I can understand.
So there were periods of frustration
because
for her.
You have difficulty with emotional surrender.
That's what my therapist said.
So you had actually put this on the list of topics before you left, which you then told me before we went live today that you don't remember putting this on the list, but then you did remember.
But you refreshed my
after
memory. That's right.
Refreshed it. Yeah. So when you think about this idea of emotional surrender, and I think for you that you specifically are talking about this in association with men, what is it about that is important to you?
I believe that males are socialized in our culture to be stoic and to have shouldistic standards for themselves and others, and to numb themselves, to put a layer of insulation between themselves and their emotional intensity. And this came up in a conversation when I was in a therapy session, and it was a somewhat emotional session, and my therapist said that it was her observation that men in particular never really got better, significantly had a breakthrough to get better until they were able to have emotional surrender, until they were able to take off the mask, put down the insulation, and allow themselves to feel whatever they felt and to face it. And that part of the requirement for good therapy is to create the safe holding environment where that invitation, just like we were chatting about going to church, the invitation at the end of the service.
Question.
Yes, and invite you to take your mask off, invite you to get in touch with those feelings in a place where you are safely supported, where you feel seen and understood, and that is the opportunity for change and transition to occur in your life. And because I had just had that kind of an experience, I thanked her profusely and said I agreed. And I was talking to you and said, let's talk about that.
So, do you feel like that you have that in your therapy with her?
Yes.
That you have that safe holding
I do. I mean, you'd have to ask her, but I think so.
Well, I mean, it's more about you than it is about her.
It is indeed.
And so do you think that you are emotionally vulnerable in front of her, or do you still find that difficult?
I resisted going to therapy for many, many years.
Oh, I'm aware.
Because I knew that I would be emotionally dishonest, that I would play head games and try and fast talk my way past difficult situations.
And one of the things that, and I remember having a conversation with you about this, that you are incredibly intelligent. And
I am. Damn.
More than,
I am so glad you noticed that.
But more than that, you are incredibly quick of wit. which is a bad combination if you want to dance on the head of a pin.
Dimwit, yeah.
No. And so you would be able to go into a therapy session and you would be able to out-talk and outsmart the therapist if you wanted to.
That would have been my goal. And I taught people how to do therapy for many years and had a lot of those conversations and dialogues with students who wanted to be therapists, and did a lot of supervision for other therapists and ongoing supervision for clinical skills and case management. Mm-hmm. So I'm confident in my ability to wear the mask should I choose to do so. So it's a leap of faith. It's a decision that you believe that it's worth doing, and that even if it's painful, it's something that's beneficial. And then you have to figure out how to get there.
But so I come, I think, from the other end of the spectrum. I think I've been emotionally vulnerable pretty much all my life. I mean, I wear my emotions much more on my sleeve. And so when I go to therapy, like, my goal is to be as emotionally vulnerable as possible.
Yeah.
So what put you in a position now at this point in your life to want to go do that?
It was
because I think guys need to know this.
It was a challenge to see whether or not I could stop sitting in the corner watching. I've been a watcher my whole life. Mm-hmm. And when I was a child, it was a requirement for safety and survival. And as I developed those skills, I learned to use them to manipulate other people in other situations to my advantage. And in this opportunity that I had to go to therapy, I decided one of my goals was to see if I could not sit in the corner mm-hmm. and monitor the conversation and read everybody's nonverbals and cross-interpret their offerings, but if I could be an active, unguarded participant. And the therapist that I chose to go to had the skill and the compassion to wait me out and not bite for false mm-hmm. nibbles, because I can't not play, mm-hmm. but I catch myself and try to stop it, or she would point it out that that's what it felt like was going on and ask me if it was, and I'd say yes, and trying to be honest. Mm-hmm. So then that's what it requires. The same thing that you do, except that you started from a different place. You started mm-hmm. with that intentionality. Mm-hmm. I didn't, for most of my life, ever have that intentionality. Mm-hmm. But in therapy now, I do. And so I work to maintain it. And I catch myself slipping. And my wife is there. We go together. And she has been incredibly graceful mm-hmm. in her lack of scoffing or challenging or aggressive responses to the game playing that I attempt to do. And she's very gentle when I don't play games mm-hmm. and when I'm in touch with something that's very powerful for me. And then she's a very loving, supportive presence, the same way my therapist is, mm-hmm. in non-manipulative, loving, supportive ways. So it's a safe holding environment. So I'm grateful for it.
So you went to therapy
yes.
with the commitment of being real. There wasn't, and
I went to therapy with the intentionality of being real, mm-hmm. being honest.
But she did do then some things that
invited me to that
okay.
and explained some things to me that I didn't see in my own behavior. About the way stuff worked or was working for me, that had some shock value, some scales falling away from my eyes, mm-hmm. and I could say, like, okay, I see that, I understand that.
So do you think that
I mean, there's still stuff that she would touch, and it's like the third rail on a subway car, mm-hmm. and just the electric shock is too painful, too powerful. Stuff mm-hmm. from my childhood, and she would ask me about it. I remember telling a story about when I was 9 years old. I came home, and my family had moved away. Nobody had mentioned it. We were moving. They got home from school, and the house was empty. The furniture was gone. The rug was gone. The dog was gone. The other kids were gone. Nobody there. And I sat on the porch and wondered what the hell was going on. Mm-hmm. Eventually, one of the neighbors came over and told me what had happened. And so she asked me, can you, if you're in touch with that memory, can you go back mm-hmm. and stand there next mm-hmm. to that little boy and reassure him that he lived through it, that mm-hmm. it's okay? And I said, no, I can't do that. I'm not even going to try. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't. I mean, some of those games, I call them games, mm-hmm. but they're experiences where you try to create a scenario and invite somebody to step into it and embrace it, are useful and helpful for the right scenario and the right person that can embrace it. I can't embrace those too readily. I can't turn the objective part of my mind off enough to get into that experience. So I wouldn't do it.
So because if you project yourself into that reality of that young man sitting on the front porch, you would also feel that emotion, and you didn't.
I don't know. Years ago in training, went to conferences on codependency, and there was this presenter who used to do mass group hypnotic things to get you in touch with your inner child and have you write a
John
message.
Bradshaw?
No,
Okay.
it was her name was Lerner, Rochelle,
Okay.
Rochelle Lerner. Very good at what she did. But sitting in a room with 3,000 people and them in a mildly induced trance, going back to their childhood home, seeing the rooms, seeing the people, and it's a guided imagery kind of experience. But you have to participate to have it be real for you. And then the goal in this experiment was have the child you write a note with their non-dominant hand to you about what they needed or what they wanted. And then have the adult aware you in your dominant hand write a note back to the child. And then not read them, not do anything with them at that moment in time except fold them, put them in your pocket, and take them home. And then later, take it out and read both of them and see.
Okay, before you reveal, let's take a break, and we'll reveal that when we come back. Hey, Brett, if you were going to tell somebody to check out something on the internet to help them with their mental health, what would you tell them?
I'd tell them, listen to Psych with Mike.
Why would you tell them that?
Because it's probably one of the most easily listenable experiences you can have that will give you information that's useful for a whole spectrum of concerns that people have.
I agree, and I have actually been told that by at least a dozen people, several of whom were not married to me, and some of them didn't even know me.
That's amazing.
That is amazing. It's when we get that kind of feedback from people, it is so incredibly humbling and overwhelming for me.
It is for both of us.
Yeah. So we really appreciate it, and as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. Okay, we're back, and so you were telling this story about you'd been in this class or workshop where this gal had put everybody into
everybody that was willing,
a very shallow hypnotic
probably 3,000
trance.
people. Yeah, and she made the announcement that there are licensed therapists all over the room who are here today to be helpful, supportive. If anybody has an emotional crisis, if they can raise their hand or get up, somebody will take them aside and find a private room and debrief them and all that stuff. And I'm sitting there thinking, not me and not any of the survivors that I know, except those that are incredibly fragile.
Did you read the messages? You had written messages. You said
but I played the game. It was
so you didn't.
bullshit
Okay, so
message.
that isn't the point of the story.
No.
Okay.
No, the point of the story is that I don't do those things.
Gotcha.
When somebody's trying to set me up for this, let's all get together and close our eyes and hold our hands and think dripping water, I don't do it. I sit in the corner and watch and see if anybody else is doing it. I don't know how readily I could be hypnotized.
Oh, yeah, I don't.
Because you got to be
willing.
Yeah, you got to be willing.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I have always believed for myself that the goal of good therapy, and obviously this is if the client wants this, because you can't do something that the client doesn't want to do. The goal of good therapy is to help people feel their feelings and learn how to be able to regulate those.
Right, you've always said that.
And
emotional regulation.
And so do you agree with that, or do you think that because I could just do that for me and then that's fine, but do you believe that is a foundation of good therapy, or do you think good therapy is not that? Or
well, I don't think good therapy can ever be reduced down to a single sentence or a descriptor. In light of the conversation we're having today, the idea that good therapy involves emotional surrender. You have to have vulnerability. You have to take the risk. It's like falling in love with somebody. You have to know love is going to hurt. You're going to get hurt, and that's the cost of doing business. But you have to embrace that cost, or you won't get the benefits. And in therapy I do with people, I'd always talk about cost-benefit ratio. Every choice that you make costs something and pays something. And the challenge in therapy is to learn to, as objectively as possible, look at the choices you make and the prices you pay. And if you're not satisfied with the prices, is there a way we can redirect and reframe the choices? If you are satisfied with the prices, then you got to pay the price, whatever it is. And so you pay it willingly. So you're not a victim, you're a participant. And to me, that has to do with logical analysis and honest choice making. The honesty comes with the acceptance that there's a price. So that is another way to describe what I think we're talking about, which is the phrase emotional surrender. I think, however, there are many mansions in many rooms in my father's mansion. There's not a single right way to do therapy or a right path for every person. We each have to find our own. And I would tell people all the time, you know what, they call and say, I've been referred to you. Can I come see you? And I said, sure, you can come see me. Well, you do this, you do that, or you're a Christian therapist. Yeah, I work with Christians. No, that's not what I meant. I said, I know what you meant. I would say, come and spend a session or two. I believe in this process, and I believe in my ability to listen to you. And if you decide that I'm okay and you come back, pay me. And if you don't pay me.
I think that emotional surrender is so hard for people because...
Well, Michelle thinks it's harder for men. She thinks women have been socialized to be in touch with their emotions and feelings more readily and less defendedly than men.
There's
you need something to cry about, I'll give you something to cry about.
Well, there's something about that, but big boys don't.
Yeah. I don't.
What?
I don't. I'm not playing.
Cry.
Yeah, I know.
Fear is a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
So those are the scripts. And so for people to be able to emotionally surrender, they have to be willing to experience sadness and hurt.
The cost of the choice is that they have to be willing to experience that. And they have to believe that it has enough value that the payoff is worth the cost.
I don't know if I think they have to be willing to believe that going
because sometimes it blindsides them. Sometimes it comes out and they have an emotional break, cathartic experience. But I don't believe that that's a positive experience unless it occurs in the safe holding environment.
Well, right. And
you don't want an unqualified therapist that's going to take that then and manipulate them in the direction of some agenda.
Of course not. But, I say to people all the time, so let me start a different way. When I worked in the hospital, one of the other therapists there, every time he was doing group, somebody would say something and he'd say, anger about that, and it just infuriated me because the assumption is that we're all angry. And I've been spending my career asking people, what are you so fracking mad about? Anger is probably the least appropriate response, emotional response for human beings in our society. There's
Except relatively it's original issue equipment.
But so is sad, glad, and scared. So we have these four primary emotions: glad, mad, sad, and scared. Anger is the most socially appropriate emotion that we are conditioned to express. So men default to anger because it's been socially conditioned, because big boys don't cry.
Macho bravado.
Fear is a sign of weakness, right? And so when I talk to people and I say, oh, how do you feel about that? They say, oh, I'm really mad. And I say, well, when I hear you talk about that, what is there to be mad about? Let's talk about what there is. Well, I don't really see what there is to be mad about. And I say, it sounds to me like what you really are is hurt. And then they start to tear up. And then I say, oh, I noticed that you might be on the verge of tears. No, I'm not.
Yeah.
But to me, that is the breakthrough. That's when I know that we are getting
But you
closer.
don't say, yes, you are. What
No,
you,
no, no, of
What you
course not.
say is, it
No.
feels to me
Yeah.
as if that's what you're feeling. And I need to check with you because I need to hear you accurately. And so is it all right that I point out to you when I think you're about to cry?
I think that is the most important thing that can happen, because once a person sees
Yeah.
that you see through the veil, that you
Right.
see the man behind the curtain,
Yeah.
and that it's okay,
And it doesn't change
that
your
you are
behavior,
approaching them in a
yes.
gentle, loving way,
God
then
love 'em.
then it
Yeah.
becomes okay to surrender.
Yeah.
But until they feel that, and that's what you mean by that safe holding environment.
There's a fairly new book out called Maybe You Should Speak to Someone. And I'm blanking on the
Did I
author's
write it?
No.
Oh,
I think Michelle Goldwyn. I'm blanking on her name.
Well, I don't
but
wanna
the
take
title of the book
anybody
is right.
else's
But
intellectual
anyway,
property.
she's a therapist.
uh-huh.
And she has a situation in her life that causes her to need to go to therapy. And she goes, and she struggles, like many therapists, struggles to find the right person, because you know everybody in the business, and you know what you think of them, and you know what your
Yeah.
skill sets are, and you also know your own gamesmanship.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it was a challenge, and more credit to Michelle for working with me. But she talks about going into the session once she picked a therapist. The first 2 or 3 sessions, all she did was cry
Yeah.
her stomach out. She didn't get a coherent sentence out. And all he did was sit there and attend to her.
Yeah.
And we used to teach people about this in classes.
And he didn't touch her.
No.
And he didn't try and stop her.
He didn't try to fix
so
her.
that's something
He
that
just
people need to understand.
attended.
I say when people
Yeah.
in therapy all the time, if there's another person there, somebody starts crying,
Oh,
immediately
yeah.
everybody
Yeah,
wants to
rescue
rush
them.
over
Yeah, shut it
and
down.
rescue
Right.
him and hug him. I'm like, I
No.
would ask that you not do that.
Absolutely.
Because I
Yeah.
want
They
people
need
to be able to
it.
feel their
Right.
feelings.
Yeah, I agree. So anyway, she, was stunned by that reality and embarrassed by it. That she and one of the questions she wanted to ask him whenever they weren't client therapist anymore, she wanted to ask him, was it like that for you when you went to therapy? Of course, he never let her get there because they weren't friends. He wasn't a paid friend.
Right.
He was her therapist, and his job was to be that blank wall that she could reflect all those emotions on, and be safe.
And so my goal is to make the world a bunch of crybabies. And not in a way where people use tears to deflect or to try and minimize. So, not a child crying because they think then they won't get spanked. But I'm talking about being able to really actually experience that, because I think that tears are the single most powerful emotional response equipment that we have been gifted with.
So I don't know that I disagree with you because I know you so well, but I would frame that description so differently. I think you're talking about emotional honesty and genuineness and safety, whatever it is that they feel. If they're mad, explore the madness. If they're hurt, explore the hurt. If they're sad, explore the sadness.
What I said,
whatever it is.
What
But
I
you said
said,
you got to cry.
What I said
don't
were
think so.
tears.
Yeah,
But happiness
can
make you cry.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I don't think we're disagreeing.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I would frame the description
I think
differently.
people are so afraid of tears that they suppress them. But if you cry out of frustration, your tears are composed of prolactin, which is a stress-related hormone. The tears that you cry change composition depending on the emotion that you are trying to get out. And that's a fact. That's a biological fact.
Yeah, so when I was crying like that, in that moment, in touch with those things, I was asked, what is it, do you know? And the word that came into my mind, was screaming in my mind, was despair. The despair, the sadness of the despair was so painful that I couldn't hold it. I couldn't carry it anymore.
And you can cry from despair, but you can also cry from joy. You can cry from frustration. You can cry from
So what
anger.
you're telling me is I'm going to be in therapy for a long time.
No, what I'm saying is that I want people to
Yes.
hear that it's okay to cry, and that if you allow yourself to cry, if you give yourself permission, that is the greatest emotional release that a person can have.
Absolutely. And so that makes me need to say, Michelle, if you're listening, and I know that you are, go ahead and buy that new house because we'll help you pay for it.
Well, I don't think I've ever met Michelle, and so.
But she's listened to these podcasts.
Yeah.
She likes me a lot better than she likes you.
I've heard that before.
Does that make you cry? Does it make you mad?
No.
No, neither one.
I
have to work on that, Michael.
I think you know me well enough to know that I'm not really impacted by what other people think.
There you go.
Now, the truth is that I am probably less impacted by what other people think than is good for me.
Yes.
Because it's gotten me in trouble in the past.
Yes.
Yeah. But no, I'm not at all insulted by that. The truth is that I like you. So
I like me. I like me better now than I did before.
I'm very content with the knowledge that other people like you.
Good, me too.
Yeah. So
that's because I've emotionally surrendered.
That was what I was going to say. That for the takeaway, do you feel like you have?
Yes.
And when you went into it, did you think you would?
No.
And now that you have, do you think that the juice was worth the squeeze?
Yes.
And I think that's...
I don't think I had an alternative.
Yeah.
I think I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker.
People will die of their pathology.
The price was getting higher and higher.
Right.
So, yeah.
But people will die of their pathology rather than surrender.
Yes.
So I think
that was a choice that I was put in the position of making, and said, I think I'll choose this one over here.
Yeah, and I think that is the takeaway message.
For which I'm grateful.
Yeah. Well, Michelle, I don't know you, but let me just say that I appreciate your patronage and share the podcast with as many of your clients as you feel comfortable.
And you're welcome to come on when our relationship is no longer as entangled. You can be a guest on the show.
Oh, if she wants to come on.
But you can't talk about me.
I was going to say, if she wants to come on, I can arrange that on a day when you're not here.
Oh, yeah. You think I would allow that?
No, I don't.
Okay. Well, Phyllis would have to be here to monitor it.
Well, that's okay with me.
Yeah.
Then I'd have two women willing to talk about you.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hopefully that was helpful for people. And, as always, anytime anything that we say has an effect on people, we are completely comfortable with you reaching out to us. If we can't ourselves do something to help you through that, we can always try and help you find somebody who can. So don't let your location or your position in life or anything like that stop you from reaching out for help. There's always help, no matter where you are, no matter what your financial situation. And if you need help trying to find that path, we would be willing to provide that. No, I thought you had something.
No,
okay.
Not me.
So,
I'm disagreeing with you.
As always, the music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. And if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.